Hello guys. So today we're going to be talking about mono Whirlwind. Again, I don't actually run Whirlwind, so I'm going to talk from what I've seen, from what I've played with, and if you agree, disagree, it's up to you. Just write it down in the comments, and you could always teach me a thing or two. Again, I sometimes don't talk about specific units, and that's because I think they're better in rainbows. So since I'm talking about mono, I might skip one or two. Don't feel I'm ignoring them. It's just I don't think you should be looking at them when you're doing this. So let's get started. What is Whirlwind good at? Well, to be honest, they have a lot of extremely strong players, especially their backline. They got some really good midliners, and they have some broken strikers. So let's go from the top to the bottom. Curran is a special case, so I will be talking about a build for him on the side after talking about the other strikers, but he does have a lot of potential. Through, I would really advise at least owning Curl if you're running Curran, because that will help a lot. So Beatrice is the worst striker, I'm sorry to say it, aka our good old Beatrice, whose art got nerfed too. They nerfed the art, they nerfed the player, everyone got stronger, and she did not. So we don't fear her anymore, sadly. Iru got a nice buff, so kind of viable. Sadly, utility is on the decline, especially with the changes with the new Dark Goalkeeper. So Shanti will still be the best one-hit or multi-hit KO style striker outside of Curran, who's a different category. So I would advise Shanti. Now, if we're looking at the front line, I know how the regular formula is always passer, leader, striker. But if we're going in mono Whirlwind, the only real front line leader is Ernesto, who doesn't really cut it. Compared to other things you could be running, I'm not going to advise him, especially since on top of it, we're in a Presti meta where you can't shoot more than one. So having two passers in front line can be much more valuable than having good old Ernesto. Again, if you really like him, you can run him, but he's not the most advised player in my opinion. Who would I be advising? Well, if you're a mono Whirlwind, I don't think it comes as a surprise that I'm going to ask you to please run this as your ace and have it as a frontline passer. Put her in the center like this when she's going to be the easiest one to kill, and they can go hit Lin Mei and revive the line. Or, well, we'll talk about different things in midline, but it's always better they come from center. And also, higher chance they'll happen anyway. So, your ace, that's a passer. Hopefully, she'll get an EE soon. And the second passer I'm going to advise is going to be Evelyn. Why? Because she has really nice pass effect and some cool line buffs. So those could actually work really well together, combined with Lucia's ace, a dragon bone. I mean, all Whirlwind's players automatically have at least one Whirlwind slot. So right there, you could be around 80% penetration before we look at your kit. So through passives, most strikers should be able to reach 100% penetration with very little work. So I think that's something very powerful that you should look at. Of course, damage increase and those other things are great, but the thing is, Whirlwind doesn't have any good totems or anything really increasing that anyway. So Shanti has a little bit of it, but penetration is where the bacon's at. Now, if you don't have these two passers, some other passers who are pretty damn great. Of course, there's Nera. Ideally, have one on your team just because she's got that beautiful mono Whirlwind buff. Put her in center mid or put her in front line. She has some insanely high pass effect. She's really close to Baltown, and a lot of people are complaining about that. I'm not going to name people, but we know exactly who we are, and I don't disagree too much that she shouldn't be that powerful. So pretty much the other passer you would put in front line, so that's 3 units. Now, the one different kind of front line, as I was saying, now let's talk about Curran. So Curran's a little bit different in the sense that you want to be able to steal before 2 minutes are up and shoot again and again and again and again, while still being able to damage and ideally having enough survival for your people not to start cowering and not stealing, because we all know how annoying that is. So you can of course do that by re-rolling, putting any form of dark critical damage on the players. Honestly, being able to keep them at a decent amount of life will help a lot, because if they stop stealing, you lost. So in that kind of idea, you might actually want to throw a Miho in midline or something like that, or somewhere on your team, just so you could have that heal. Because if they stop stealing, it's GG for a Curran. Now, a Curran is, like I said, they're really looking at the stealing aspect. So you're going to look at a front line that specializes in stealing. Really good players for that are Rudiel. She's one of the best stealers Whirlwind has. You can also throw Kiki because she's going to increase the survival of the stealers. So it's really not that bad. Nerazel gives pass effect. Also one of the strongest stealers Whirlwind has. And if you want, you can of course throw Princess Marianne for that beautiful active for the speed buff, or you can have her midline, backline. It's up to you once again. We could even throw Lin May, just because if they try penetrate, they heal the line, and if she gets the ball and passes, she also heals the line. So it's another way to bring survival to the front line. So you could do a little combination between those, but you at least want to have one of these two stealers, one of these two leaders, and well, the result is up to you. If you don't have her in front line, have her in midline. Current lines are usually known for being four-man front line, so try to take some of those players, because the idea is once the ball's in there, it never leaves. But he will, again, as I'm pointing out, really take an advantage from Curl's totem buff, so you really want to try have them together. Curran doesn't tend to actually use Elucia's ace, just for the obvious reason that there's no place for her on the team. Now for the midline, there are two ways to do it. The more current style way is to put, if you're not putting her in front line, Nera in center mid, on the left side Curl, on the right side Vivid Fear, both built for counterattack resistance. The idea is basically that Nera is going to outspeed the opposing team, make an active pass, you just penetrate, bring it to the front line, Current makes a pass, and it's basically the infinite thing until they die. Or if they have the ball, Nera is able to steal it, active pass to Current, and the same gig goes over and over. So that's kind of the idea of what you're going to be doing, but it can work pretty well. The only thing is you got to be aware you're not going to be reflexing people, but it's pretty damn powerful. Now, if on the opposite, you want to go the reflex route, there's only one actual issue that Warwind has with that. They're missing what I would say one of the key positions for that in the basic players that should be stuck there. So on the right side, as always, we're going to just stick Vivid Fear. Whatever you're doing, you have her on your team because her kit is just too good. Reflex buff, reflex debuff, healing the line, that's just beautiful. So you're going to be sticking her there. Now the second problem that Warwind has, because it would actually be very easy, but the problem is Princess Marianne and Lin May have the exact same line buff. And this causes the issue that two line buffs of the same name do not stack. So you can only have one, meaning the other one's pretty much a useless totem, and at that point, why are you running them? So some people even try to do like some active passes and some weird stuff in there. A good way I've seen Warwind to get over that is, well, running Curl in the line I previously explained, or running Silk on the left side because, well, she gives reflex. It's a different type of buff, and she can still do that active critical resistance who helps the rest of the team, but since she's not in backline, don't await your backline to have critical resistance enough to survive the striker. Plus, that's more Warwind Dark, to be honest, but it can work pretty damn well in midline. If not, I've seen a lot of people who like to throw in a Zenlong. There's, I think, another one that they also stick in. I'm personally not the biggest fan of that. And I know a lot of people are going to point out to, you could just put Sing in center mid. He doesn't actually have a line buff. It's true that he retains himself some really good stats, but if he's not helping the line, it can just mean you're going to be reflexed. So not the greatest idea. Hopefully, when he gets his E, his last skill becomes a line buff, and that would solve everything. As long as it does not stack on Lin May, Marianne, and Princess Marianne's just, yeah, hopefully. 5 times the same skill stacking. If you want to throw Silk and backline, what I've seen was pretty good actually, is now a Miho in left side, because with her E, she now has the stats to play the game. She has the reflex. She can always pull off an active who can help certain comps, and she is pretty decent overall. So you could also consider her if you really want your Silk in backline. Now for backline, let's be honest, Warwind has 3 great goalkeepers. There's no big question about that. They have BT with her nice DR when shot at. Ire got buffed to a point she's actually viable, and there's no longer that stupid gamble thing. And we have Jin. So what units are you going to be running with the goalkeepers? Again, they kind of go under the same idea. Jin can be built any way you want because of his nice kit. BT is ideally more DR, but she can do crit res. Ire is ideally more crit res, but she can do DR. Look at the skills and the stoning, and you'll get what I'm talking about. Now, if you're running them, you're obviously going to have Magnus. Magnus is that player that you got to be selling the house before you actually move him off the line. Now, Magnus broken. I don't think I need to explain to you guys why we hate him. It's more an issue of the fact that he can work on lines that are not just mono Warwind with his line buffs, and he is honestly broken, so you have no issue sticking him there. He's a no-brainer. Now, before you're going to stick with Magnus, especially if you're running a Jhin, a Kiki's always a damn good option. Just because, well, she has a really nice line buff and she has an affection chain with Jhin. And for people who don't know, affection chains multiply the base and are not a separate multiplier as regular line buffs are, so it's going to multiply it a lot. For example, when my Scylla gets a Nemesis chain, she usually gets 1,500 extra life points for a single chain. That should kind of give you guys an idea of how important affection is. Now, if you're going for the critical resistance route, this is where you would also stick your good old Silk. Now, the one thing you got to know is those are free players, and if you're not running a current line, you should have a fourth. And the thing is, you should be sticking a legend, because ideally, you started Warwind with at least one of these guys, and all of them go in backline. Well, of course, Jhin is more technical because Jhin is a goalkeeper, so he doesn't actually take a slot. But you should really consider having one of those in one of those slots. If you really can't find any, you can always put maybe a Linmei for them to shoot at or a Samir, but it's not going to be as powerful. So this helps you guys get a basic understanding of how Warwind runs. Just again, if you're really going for the critical resistance, I would advise doing a Warwind Dark team, just because if you add Alice, Celestia, those critical resistance from midline are just going to make it beautiful. So just keep that in mind. It's going to be much more powerful in that sense. So you can't really max out on a critical resistance aspect. Well, you could still have some really nice DR just staying mono Warwind. So again, if you have any questions, comment, or you want to point out something I forgot because I'm not mono Warwind myself, leave it in the comments, and I'm going to be doing a light dark video who I actually run later on today. Have a good day, guys.